Hello and welcome back to my treehouse. Today I'm going to tell you about 15 spooky Halloween picture books that will get your kids excited for a Halloween where maybe it's not going to be safe for them to go trick-or-treating. Certainly it's not going to be safe for them to go to Halloween parties. I think we might try to do trick-or-treating with like a chute for the candy, like out of PVC pipes. That could be fun. We'll see if we can get that built in time. Definitely it's a different Halloween than most, and there's nothing better to get in the spooky spirit and stay safe like having lots of spooky picture books to read. So the first book that I'm going to tell you about is Ghosts in the House. This was written and illustrated by Kazuno Kohara. And this is one of my daughter's absolute favorite books. This is perfect for toddlers. I think even babies would like it. Because it's a very simple story with very few words per page and really compelling art. But I think older kids would also enjoy it. So this has been one of our favorites this year. I love this art that has a combination of very simple black and orange line drawings, and then the ghosts are like overlaid with white tissue paper, which I think is really creative. Basically, this little girl moves into a spooky old house at the edge of the town, but the problem is it's haunted. But she's not just a girl, she's a witch, and she knows just what to do with those ghosts. She catches them, puts them in her washing machine, and turns them into curtains and blankets and tablecloths. So it's a very good book for being very slightly spooky. And the reason we read spooky stories, right, as kids is to learn to conquer our fears. Kids like books about spooky things and ghosts and monsters because it helps them to overcome fears in a safe way. And this is definitely a book that has that going for it and is cute enough that I think even like very little kids would enjoy it. I give this one 5 out of 5 pumpkins. All right, the next book, Peep the Cat and Trick or Pete. I think in a normal year when, we would definitely be going trick-or-treating, this would be a great book to prepare kids for the way trick-or-treating is gonna be spooky, but not too spooky. So it's a lift the flap book, which of course the kids love. And Pete is worried at the beginning, just like kids can be worried that trick-or-treating is gonna be too spooky. But his dad says, don't worry, we have flashlights. What was that shape? It was just an owl. What was that scary figure? It's just a scarecrow. And so it's kind of helping kids conquer their fears every time they lift the flap. Halloween is fun and spooky, but not too spooky. And ultimately, trick-or-treating wasn't too spooky at all. It was full of sweet surprises. So this one my daughter's been asking for over and over and over. She loves Peep the Cat. And this one I would also give 5 pumpkins out of 5 pumpkins. It was great. All right, The Scariest Book Ever. This was written by Bob Shea, and I think also illustrated by Bob Shea. Yeah, written and illustrated by Bob Shea. I think the art is so cool in this one. It's probably the strongest aspect of it for me is the art. It's all told from the voice of, there's not really a narrator, it's the main character speaking. It's like a monologue given by this ghost, this spooky ghost. And the ghost is afraid of the creepy dark woods. So again, that's kind of like a turning fears on their head narrative. The ghost is the one who's afraid of the creepy dark woods. The ghost spills orange juice on itself early on and becomes like this clear overlay paper, which is kind of cool. And these are the creepy dark woods that the ghost is afraid to go into. But out of this hole pops a bunny rabbit. And so you as the reader are sort of in this position where you're trying to convince the ghost to go to this Halloween party that the rabbit is throwing. It's really kind of an unusual book. For example, he's like, are you trying to trick me so I go into the woods and get scared? Well, things are plenty scary right here. See, a kitty drinking milk. Maybe it's the kind of kitty that doesn't like hugs. That's scary. Hey, where are you going? So it kind of has this sense of humor, but the humor actually goes right over my 3-year-old's head. She doesn't really get this book, but that's okay. She likes the art and she wants to read it and thinks that it's fun. And I think that older readers will pick up on the humor more. On art alone, I would give this book a 5. I think it's really creative. I think the clear overlay for the ghost is really cool. In terms of the story, I would give it like a 4 out of 5 pumpkins because again, My daughter finds it kind of confusing, but she's only 3. For older readers, they might really love this book and think it's very funny. So definitely also highly recommend The Scariest Book Ever by Bob Shea. The next book I am also going to give 5 pumpkins to. Oh my gosh, I love Zip Zoom on a Broom. So this is a great counting Halloween book. And it has addition and subtraction. So it starts with 1 goes zip, 2 goes zoom, 3 witches glide from room to room. It has a very nice rhyme scheme that is fun to read. This book, it's not our first time checking it out. I also checked it out last Halloween and I think the Halloween before. So even when she was a baby, she enjoyed this book because of the fun illustrations and the fun bouncy rhyme scheme. So this one's good even for babies. And then once all the witches are on the broom, they start like casting spells on each other and jostling each other until they fall off. But it's very clear that all the witches fall off safely and, land on the edge of a volcano or turn into a bird or, they fall into a lily pad. So the witches are all fine. There's just that little element of danger there. So I would give this one also 5 pumpkins. I love Zip Zoom on a Broom, and that is by Terry Sloat, illustrations by Rosalind Bonnet. Great job, Terry and Rosalind. The next book is How to Scare a Ghost. This one is by Jean Reagan, illustrated by Lee Wildish. It's part of some series, a spooky how-to book, and basically the book is about things that you do at Halloween. The reason you decorate your house is to attract ghosts, according to this book. The reason you do all those crafts in school is to attract ghosts. This is, again, in the pandemic, it's a little bit hard because this book has multiple pages about being in school and Halloween time at school. And if your kid's having a hard time with that and really missing that, you might want to avoid this book for that reason. Or it might be nice for them to be reminded of the fun things they used to do in school at Halloween. But it's a funny book. My daughter likes it. The art is pretty cute, and the ghost is scared of the vacuum cleaner. Again, like taking a fear, turning it on its head. I don't know why this one isn't my favorite. It's just like it just hasn't appealed to either of us quite as much. I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5 pumpkins, but it's a good generic Halloween book. I also love Little Boo. Little Boo is by Stephen Wonderly, illustrated by Tim Zeltner. So this book is cute because it's actually a gardening book. It's teaching kids about the life cycle of pumpkins. So Little Boo starts out as a seed, and Little Boo wants to be scary. He's trying to scare the leaves, but he is just too tiny to be scary. He's not scary. And the wind becomes Little Boo's friend and tells him, not yet, it's not time to be scary yet, and pushes dirt over Little Boo. And so Little Boo sleeps, and in the spring starts to grow, and so it goes through the life cycle of the pumpkin until eventually Little Boo is turned into a jack-o'-lantern and is very scary and is able to scare all the little goblins running around. So I think because this book is both educational and it has great art and it has a compelling story, it's getting 5 out of 5 pumpkins. Definitely check out Little Boo. This one is Stumpkin by Lucy Ruth Cummins, and it's the story of a pumpkin without a stem, and so it isn't chosen to be a jack-o'-lantern at Halloween. It's a cute story. The art is these very simple, like gray and black watercolor with some orange and green highlights, which kind of helps it stand out. I do like the art. There's not really much spooky about this story. It's more of a feeling story about kind of, sometimes kids like those tragic stories about, the feeling of not getting picked for something. That's a tough emotion we got to deal with. Even the lumpy gourd gets picked ahead of Stumpkin because it doesn't have a stem. So the book kind of goes on, and all these pumpkins are growing, and Stumpkin remains. But finally, at the end, it's kind of subtly revealed that Stumpkin does get turned into a jack-o'-lantern after all, which is, of course, every pumpkin's dream. Because Stumpkin, the shopkeeper who owns the pumpkin shop, ends up choosing Stumpkin. I like this story a lot. My daughter also, again, asked for it a lot. It's appropriate and not scary at all, so you can read it to 3-year-olds. You could read it to babies. My only complaint with it is as a bedtime story, it's like a bit long. I think we could have had a few fewer pages about which Stumpkins are getting picked and Stumpkin is staying behind. But overall, really solid choice. I would give this one like 4.5 out of 5 pumpkins. And yeah, definitely check it out from your library. Very cute, Stumpkin. The next book that we picked out from our library that my daughter does really love is Bonaparte Falls Apart. My daughter asked for this a ton, and so this one would probably be 5 pumpkins according to her. I am a little uncomfortable with just a few things about it, which I maybe like, I'm that person who like way overreads into things, so you might not agree with me. I may be really overthinking it, but we'll see what you think. So the art is great. It's pencil drawings done by Will Terry. They're absolutely adorable. The spooky figures are not too spooky for my 3-year-old, so that's good. The story is by Margaret Kyler. Don't know how to say it. So basically the story of Bonaparte Falls Apart is that Bonaparte is this little boy whose like pieces of his body keep falling off because he's a skeleton. And he's embarrassed about this and is worrying that the kids at school are going to bully him. So this is the first thing about this story that, I don't know, I don't like the expectation of the story is that he will be bullied and he has to change something about himself in order to avoid bullying. I guess that's really the heart of what bothers me about this story. Like, his friends team up to find a way to stick his bones on him more tightly. And all of their solutions, like bolting him together, spinning him up in a web, they make it so that he can't move or he can't see. They're not good solutions. Finally, they get a dog to help him. So they find Bonaparte Bonaparte's the kid. Mandible is the little dog who Bonaparte can train to pick up the pieces of him and bring them back to him. In a way, though, to me, it kind of maps as a parallel, and I'm not sure if this was the author's intention, as the dog being like sort of like an assistive dog. And it's kind of like Bonaparte has a disability where he has a difference from other kids and he needs this like assistive dog to help him. But the fact that it was his disability that was destined to make him the target of bullying, and there wasn't any kind of message about the bullying being wrong. It's just like Bonaparte needs to find a way to fix himself to not get bullied. That's what kind of bothered me about this story. But again, maybe I'm overthinking it. It's a cute little story about a skeleton. But for me personally, I'd give it 3 out of 5 pumpkins for that reason. Let me know in the comments what you think. Am I overthinking it or is there something there? Okay, the next 3 books are too scary for my daughter. She could not handle them. So these are for older kids. I think probably once kids are like 5 or 6 maybe, they might enjoy the level of spookiness. But I think just at this time, we read these books one time, and then after that, when I pulled them out again, my daughter said that book's too scary, and so I just like trust her on that. I don't try to like push her on that. I really like this book though, and I think that especially if you're teaching your kids Spanish or you're a dual language family, Spanish and English, you should definitely check out Los Gatos Black on Halloween. It's a great book for introducing like Halloween words in Spanish. I love the art. It's these great paintings of the different types of monsters that come out on Halloween, and it introduces the Spanish vocabulary for those monsters. So next, los fantasmas drag their chains, the ghosts, the phantoms shriek their pains, now come the ghouls, then zombies march beneath the trees where branches arch. So it also has a great rhyming scheme, which I love in a children's book, and the art is, I think, very spooky in a fun way, but maybe too spooky again for little ones. So for older kids, I would give this one 5 out of 5 pumpkins. The next 2 books are both parodies, and these were also both too scary for my daughter. Goodnight Goon, I think just the art alone, obviously it's a parody of Goodnight Moon, and then Frankenstein is a parody of Madeline. Goodnight Goon, I would give like 4 out of 5 stars just for being a parody that's kind of cute with monsters. But the art was just too scary for my daughter. She didn't want to go on this ride. She's also not familiar with Goodnight Moon. We don't have that book, which maybe seems like a giant oversight, but I don't know. Sometimes like the most popular books I'm just like not into getting because I figure she'll hear it somewhere, you know? But yeah, I don't know. Some of the pictures are really pretty freaky. I think older kids would really enjoy this book and think it's funny, particularly if they're familiar with Goodnight Moon. Okay, Frankenstein. Again, this is a parody of Madeline, which is like a delightful, charming book, right? The art is very cute, and you would think that this is going to be like a pretty cutesy Halloween book, but it is very dark. The monsters start eating people and like tormenting their teacher. I don't know. I find it quite disturbing for like a kid's picture book. It also has a to me, this is pretty problematic of like Dr. Bone. I don't think that like African masks should be conflated with like actual monsters. So this was probably my least favorite of all of the ones that we picked, just because of like how weirdly disturbing it is for a kid's book. That problematic representation. So I would say, like, for me, 1 out of 5 pumpkins for Frankenstein. I didn't enjoy this parody. I think it's like a little mean-spirited. The last 5 books are books that we own. They're just classics that I had to include. So this one was gifted to me by a mom friend, and this was one of my daughter's favorite first books as a baby. It's 5 Little Pumpkins. I hear there's a sequel too, which I want to get from the library. But it's a board book. It's very short and great for babies for their first Halloween. I would give it 5 out of 5 pumpkins for very young readers, for like ages, 6 months to 3 years. By the time they're 3 years old, they're getting to be a little bit too old for this. So it's not the right Halloween book for older readers, but great for babies. The last 3 are from my childhood, and they've become some of my daughter's favorites, which are really fun. I think they're all out of print, except for the Spooky Old Tree. I'm pretty sure is still in print. But you can still find them relatively cheaply on Amazon and other places as used books. So this one was one of my favorites as a kid. It's Where's the Halloween Treat? Maybe you recognize it from your childhood. And a series, it's teaching numbers, again, with Halloween fun. And kids go to a series of houses. So there's counting, you can count the kids. So for 2, on page 2, there's the number 2. You've got 2 kids, and there's a costume trick-or-treater giving away 2 treats. And that keeps going. So again, 6 trick-or-treaters, the number 6 treats from the queen. But then on page 7, there's a surprise. It says, come in. There's an inner door. And there's a ghost. Boo! That page is very fun. And at the end, you get to see that all the kids were wearing costumes the whole time. So this is one that was cute enough that my daughter, when she was a baby, she loved it. This is the book we used to like prepare her for trick-or-treating before her first time out trick-or-treating. And I think it's great for that. Again, we're not trick-or-treating this year, so maybe it's just gonna like bring up some stuff about trick-or-treating if they're not going to be able to, but it's a great Halloween book, and I love it. The next book is from my childhood. This one is like $20 used because it is out of print, but oh my god, Jan Pienkowski, what a paper book genius. So this is a pop-up book, Haunted House, and it's so spooky to me, but I gotta move because the sun. So I think this book is like super spooky. This is from my childhood. It's held up pretty well for being like 30 plus years old, probably. There's all different kinds of pop-ups to explore. There's like spooky monsters. The story is about these 2 little mice are like going on a tour of this haunted house. And at the end, one of them gets eaten by a cat, but you can kind of gloss over that part. You don't really even have to read the text. It's really about the like wow factor and discovering the different pop-ups. This broke. The bathtub's supposed to be attached, and then you do this. My nephew read that, I think. But yeah, I think this is one of the greatest pop-up books of the time, and I have such fond memories of like loving the experience of reading this book as a kid, and now my daughter loves to look at it. Even though I'm surprised, like I would have thought this would be too scary for her at age 3, she loves it and wants to look at it all the time. So if you do have little ones, be careful with your pop-up books, and I would say like store them in a higher place because they will try to get at them themselves and like rip at them. So you got to kind of be the one to like get it down, read it, and then put it somewhere safely and make sure they don't destroy it. The last book, it's actually not specifically a Halloween book, but it is a spooky book, and I think it is the greatest book of all time. I also have it completely memorized because my daughter, this was her first favorite book when she was like 8 months old or something. Like, she really didn't, we would read her books and everything seemed to just go over her head, and she'd only be interested for a second too. This book she wanted to read over and over too. She would bring it to us. We had it memorized. I mean, I've read this book to her like probably upwards of 1,000 times. She loved it so much, and she still loves it. So if you're not familiar, it's a Berenstain Bears book about the spooky old tree. And there's 3 little bears, one with a light, one with a stick, one with a rope. A spooky old tree. Do they dare go into the spooky old tree? Yes, they dare. And later on, they dare to go through the moving wall and into the spooky hall, and they dare to go over the great sleeping bear. And at the end, this was my favorite page as a kid. Like, I remember how fun this page was, and like the feeling of like having to escape through this spooky old tree by going down a slide and out the door. So they get to revisit like all the places in the spooky old tree they've been at the end. And finally, you know, they get home safe, home again, safe at last. It's that feeling of having conquered your fears that kids just like crave, right? So I think maybe my daughter was like a bit of a goth baby in really, really loving this from the time she was a baby. It might be too scary for some kids. But for my daughter, it was like perfect. And this was one of our all-time favorite books. So this book gets 6 out of 5 pumpkins because I do think it is the greatest spooky story children's book of all time. Please let me know what you think is the greatest spooky children's story of all time in the comments. And I would love to hear more suggestions because all these library books are due back tomorrow, and I'm gonna have to get new Halloween books. So maybe I'll even do a second one of these if I have time before Halloween. If you're interested in like writing updates, I just kind of finished the book launch media blitz for Depart, my adult novella. And what I'm working on now is I actually just got back edits of my YA novel, Sand and Swarm. I just got back second round edits from my literary agent. I'm working on those. I'm hoping to have them done by mid-October, and then hopefully we're going on sub before the end of the year. For those of you who aren't familiar with publishing, going on sub is like basically when you're trying to sell your book to one of the major publishing houses. So I'm excited to be able to go through that process. It's definitely not a sure thing that every book that goes on sub will sell, but I still love my book. I think it's relevant for these times. It's a dystopia about climate change and political corruption and all sorts of things about being an 18, 19-year-old college student and figuring out the world and figuring out who you are. And I really want to bring that book to you all. So fingers crossed that I can get these edits done and it's great and it goes on sub and we sell it. So thank you again for joining me. Lee, I would love to hear your comments. Please like the video, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.